Hello, Phil Jordan here. Podcast tonight, we'll be talking about the human aura, the energy field that surrounds all living things, not just human beings. I've been able to see the aura for quite some time, and I recall the first time I ever saw the aura around an individual, and actually it was during a confirmation service in church. And the bishop who comes and does the confirmation, he was standing in front of a stained glass window. And I was an altar boy, an acolyte in my home parish in Candor. And I looked at the bishop, and he had this beautiful light around his head. And it was like almost like a colored cloud around his head. It had purples and silvers and white. And then I realized, well, he's standing in front of the stained glass window, so it's probably the sun coming through on that beautiful June morning. And it was probably the sun shining through that stained glass window that gave that appearance. And I was satisfied with that until he walked away from the window and the light around his head and body stayed with him. And so I assumed that was just some sort of a spiritual manifestation. And it wasn't until years later that I realized that was his aura, that I had been brought into an unconscious awareness, which is where all psychic occurrences take place, is in the unconscious mind. And I had transcended my conscious mind through the spiritual beauty of the service. And so I was in a very spiritual place. And so I could see his aura. And so a while after that, I began to try to perceive people's auras. I tried to transcend my conscious mind, go into the unconscious mind, much like you do when you're sleeping or hypnotized or anything like that, where you go into the unconscious mind. And I would look just past a person's head, usually around their ears, because the aura is connected psychologically as well as physiologically. Your psychological self and the physiological self has input into what the colors and the activity of the aura means. And at first I was seeing just clear energies, sort of like when you're in the summer weather, when you look at the road and the heat's coming up in waves off the road. That's what it looked like at first. And I would have a person stand in front of a pure white wall, and that way I could see the energy, but I could also see the colors coming through. And so it got to the point where I could begin to see the aura, but it took a lot of transcending thought to get to the unconscious mind to see the auras. And I worked at it, and pretty soon it became second nature to me. And so I've been able to see auras ever since. And in a reading, when I'm in the presence of a person I'm reading for, I can see their auras and tell a little bit about their health and their mental activities and things that are going on. It was several years into reading the aura that I was asked to come to Kent State University in Ohio. There was a man there who studied the auras. Can't remember his name. I think his last name was Johnson. But what he would do, he had developed a process called Kirlian photography, which I think was truly developed perhaps in England and then brought to the States. But Kirlian photography could take a picture of the aura. And what they did was have me in one room, and I would read a person's aura, and they would go into another room away from me and have a picture of their aura taken. And we would compare with what I saw with what the picture in the Kirlian photography showed. And it was really quite accurate and quite amazing to myself, let alone everybody else. So I began to rely on the aura a great deal. And so I could perceive the aura and help me a great deal in my life as far as knowing what other people might be thinking about me. If their aura was bright red, it could be agitated, or if it was light blue and white and silver, they were at peace. And so I developed a color scheme as to what the colors of the aura meant. Because most everyone's aura, the base color was either blue or green. And blue meant pretty good health, medium blue not such good health, dark blue not real good at all. The green showed that life was going good and there was probably going to be some new beginnings there. Silver showed me that the person may have had above average intuitive abilities, or that they might have been pursuing something educationally or developing their mind in some way. White was a very spiritual color, and it's usually associated also with light blue, and that usually is around a person who might be working in the health field or dealing with health, mental or physical health, with a career path. Red shows frustration or anxiety, and if I could see red over a certain area of the body, that meant that part of the body might not be functioning right. If I saw yellow or a yellowish orange, that meant really not good health over that certain part of the body. And lavender or purple meant that there was healing, and often I could see that somebody was having perhaps a thyroid issue or gallbladder issue, but that their body was sort of healing that, even though I would see red mixed in with the lavender. And it really began to show me this energy field, which I directly connect to the spirit, because spiritual energy is what gives our body life. And we know that because when the body dies, the spirit moves on, and the heart, which creates the battery for the energy, that energy comes in, our spirit comes in when the heart starts to beat. And we know that because when a person dies and their heart quits, that energy no longer is necessary to the body, and the body is no longer necessary to the spirit. And I find in my journey that one fascinating thing is, because being a funeral director and an ordained minister, I've been at many deathbed scenes, and often a person's aura will get extremely beautiful within hours before they die. And I found that very comforting, because it shows me that they've already begun their transition out of the body into the spirit world, but most of all, they have found peace from their suffering. And they are already discovering the peace that the afterlife has to offer. So I found that very, very intriguing. I found in my police work that when I interviewed a person that might have been involved in a crime, that if they lied to me, their aura would jump. And I could channel my interview according to their auras. And have an interesting story about that. One night I was interviewing a man, when I was a deputy, I was interviewing a man in a burglary case, and I suddenly felt that I could see years ago very popular was what was called a squash necklace, which was a turquoise necklace, a big necklace. And I could see that that was involved in the burglary. So I said to him, I was questioning about the burglary and asked him a couple questions, and then I asked him about the squash necklace, and his aura jumped, and I said, "Are you sure that you didn't steal a squash necklace?" And he says, he got very flustered, and he says, "Well, not in this burglary that you're asking me about." So actually it was in another burglary that he had taken the squash necklace. And so he was, we resolved 2 burglaries that night, and it all happened from being able to read the aura a little bit. And so I thought that was quite intriguing, quite exciting as far as that goes. And I always say I watch people's auras while I'm doing church, and when I see their auras begin to be less active, time to draw the sermon to an end because they're getting ready to go sleep. And so there's a lot you can tell about the aura. One of the fascinating things, people always ask me, do you see your own aura? Can you read your own aura? And I can read my own aura. And 20-some years ago, I was at my nephew's wedding. And I love to dance, and my sister and I had danced a jitterbug, and we do very well together. And I had a pain come under the back of my right shoulder blade. And I was short of breath and sweaty from dancing, so I went outside to catch my breath, and the pain didn't go away. So I came in and went in the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and the aura over my chest was gray and red, which meant, I believed that it meant that I was having a heart attack. So I went to my niece and I said, "We have to sneak out the side door. I have to go to the hospital." And she says, "Are you sick?" And I said, "I think I'm having a heart attack." So the hospital was only about 5 minutes away. So we got there, and I told them that I thought I was having a heart attack. So they took me in immediately. And sure enough, I was having a heart attack. The next day I had 2 stents placed, and the doctor was working on me, and he says, "You have no symptoms, none of the common symptoms of a heart attack. How'd you know you were having a heart attack?" And the nurse that was attending says, "You got to know what he does for a living." And it was true. I could tell through my aura that I was having a heart attack, and at that time, you could get what they called the golden shot, which made it so I didn't have any heart damage. And you had to have the shot within an hour, and it was within 20-some minutes. So reading the aura saved heart damage, and reading the aura got me to go to the hospital. Otherwise, I probably would have stayed and danced until I danced my way into heaven, hopefully heaven. And so that was intriguing. I think gifted people have always seen the aura. I think in biblical times, the sighting of the aura is mentioned, and a lot of times it's, I think, associated with the glow of the face or head during a transfiguration of either Jesus or any of the disciples or any of the things. And I also think the artists through the centuries who always paint a halo or an emanation of light around their individuals that they're painting, I think that they perceive the aura and put it into their paintings. And I think they perceive the aura because if you have a gift, you will have increased intuition, increased understanding, and empathy and everything for the other person. And I think very probably they may not have visualized the aura, but they may have seen it in their mind and painted that in. And so I think people have seen the auras throughout history, and I think that it's very intriguing. Not everyone can see the aura, and some people, I think, misinterpret the aura. I interpret it through 60 years of being able, well, 50 years of being able to read the aura and what the colors mean and what the activity means and things of that nature. It's not just with human beings that have an aura. All animals in the kingdom have an aura. All the animals in the kingdom have instinct. All the animals in the kingdom have sort of an intuitive side to themselves. But because all the animals have auras, I've been able to read an animal's aura and tell certain melodies that may be in the body of that animal. I remember at one time I was asked by a vet in the Buffalo area, Buffalo, New York area. He had a horse that there was problems with its back left hind quarter. And he couldn't find what was wrong with it. I said, have you x-rayed it? And he says, yes, I've x-rayed it. And I says, you have to x-ray his spine from the top, not from the side. And he says, well, I've been x-raying it from the side. And he x-rayed it from the top. And I said, I think I showed him on the picture of the horse where I felt there was a problem with a disc in the horse's back. And sure enough, right where I pointed, because the aura showed me that, there was a crack in a vertebrae that was causing some problems and causing lameness to that back left leg. And so I think that I probably saved the owners some money, because it could be taken care of, I think, with therapeutic methods, and probably didn't cost them as much as a surgery might cost. But it worked well, that worked well. And people always ask me, do you see the aura all the time? And yes, I do see the aura all the time. I don't pay attention to it all the time unless it really strikes my fancy for some reason. But I developed reading the aura all the time because I worked a lot of very intense criminal cases, and I wanted to know what everyone around me was thinking. And it helps me in my everyday life. If someone's having a bad day, I can tell by their aura, and I know how to deal with them, or how to know and understand what they might be going through. And so anyone can get, so they can read the aura. I taught classes at a junior college for a few years, and one of the courses was auras. And I've got the class so about 90% of them could see the aura, and probably out of that 90%, 70% of them would see the color of the aura, and they would begin to be able to interpret it. The aura will be more pronounced around the head, but the more you open your mind to see the aura, the more it will emanate around the entire physical body, and you can tell a little bit more what's going on in the physical person, as well as what's going on in the psychological person. So it's very fascinating what the aura has meant to me, and how I've developed to be able to read the aura. One time I was traveling in Florida, and I went to visit a friend who had moved there, and I hadn't seen the friend for several years, I would say probably 15 years, and her mother-in-law was at the house. And I noticed in her mother-in-law's aura that she had a spot on her left breast that was sort of an orange-yellow color. And I said, you know, I think that she should be checked for breast cancer, because I think that color shows me usually that there's cancer there. Oh, she says, well, you just had her checked for cancer, and she had a lump removed, and perhaps that's what you're seeing. And I said, no, I think it's something there in the tissue and it should be checked again. So she took her and had her checked, and sure enough, they found a spot of cancer that they didn't find previously. And so it saved her a lot of medical despair by knowing that ahead of time. And so it's just very unique to me how reading the aura has been helpful to me, not only in my life, but in my readings. And so it's just very, very fascinating to see how our energy, not just our spiritual or physical energy, but how it surrounds us and how it emanates from our bodies, and how we can gather some wisdom from that that will help us in our personal life. And so that's what I have to say about auras, I think. So do you have any questions, Tony?
I was wondering if you ever just went up to somebody after seeing their aura, knew that there was something either, I guess more often bad than good, but something where it was outstanding, and you approached them.
I've done that a few times, but not often at all, because I don't like to push my work onto somebody. I don't know if they're believers or non-believers. It's sort of like religion. I don't like people pushing their religion on me, and I try not to push mine on others. But if I see something that I think can help help a person to avoid some issues in their life, I certainly would walk up and tell them ahead of time so that they could work with that, or they could take care of it, or heal from that, or whatever. So I've done that on a few occasions, but not many at all, because I don't like to push my work on anybody else.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe if it was somebody that you've known forever, or a friend or something that you might point it out, but again, you're kind of prying into the personal side of somebody's life, and they might not like that either.
One thing I find interesting is when there's a pregnancy, there's a pink haze in the outer edge of the aura. And so it may be the person I'm reading, or it may be somebody closely connected in love to that person. And they may not even know that. I was doing a public show one night, and I said to this woman, you have a glow of pink in your aura, so somebody around you is pregnant. And she says, no, I don't think so. But I says, it's either a daughter or daughter-in-law, it's somebody a generation under you, and it's so pronounced in your aura, I'm sure there's a pregnancy you're going to hear about soon if you haven't recently heard about it. So she went home from the show that night and called her daughter and said, why didn't you tell me you were pregnant? She says, I just heard it at a psychic show at the hotel. And the girl says, I just found out at 2 o'clock this afternoon that I was pregnant, and I didn't have time to call you and tell you because I knew you were going to the show tonight, and I'd rather tell you in person, so I was waiting. And she says, well, the psychic told me that you were pregnant and that you would have a girl child. And sure enough, she went on to have the child, and it was a girl. So I find that very fascinating. It's a way of being nosy without being nosy.
Think of another question. I know you're talking about auras and all kinds of I guess creatures and animals, and it was a good example with the horse. And everybody, not everybody of course, but a lot of people have cats and dogs, and just wondering if you've seen them, an issue with them, their auras.
Yeah, all the time, and people ask me about their animals because their animals are their family. They're part of their family. So I have a little dog, and I'm always reading her aura every morning to make sure everything's okay. And sure enough, it is. And it's interesting because when she gets red in her aura, I know she's mad at me. Today, her aura was getting sort of medium blue, and it's because she saw me packing a suitcase. I have to go away for a couple days, and so she became a little bit depressed, and so I think that the animals have just as profound auras as the humans do. So I think that is significant.
I'll have to have you read on my cats later then. See what their auras are.
That's right. That's right. They always have good auras.
See if they're going to frustrate me at all.
Well, they usually do. And that turns your aura red. So that's okay. That's okay. So I think we've covered everything about auras. So, and I hope people listening to the podcast, if you want to send a question you would like me to work with, you can send that to
Phil Jordan Psychic at gmail.com.
Phil Jordan Psychic at gmail.com. And we're going to be advertising for my new book, A Winter's Journey, because it'll be a good Christmas gift, because it takes place at Christmas, the novel does. And so it's going to be a good Christmas gift for people. So do think about getting that. And I have my autobiography available through my office. And you can find all that at philjordan.com on my website. And again, if you have questions you would like me to work with, send them to philjordanpsychic
at gmail.com.
At gmail.com. So, and I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we'll be doing another one in the next week or two. Thank you.